Alright, party people, welcome back to Theory and Theology podcast. Welcome back. This is going to be a spoiler alert episode. Spoiler alert. Hear me when I say it first. I'm about to spoil this whole movie for you guys if you keep listening. So if you want to watch the movie The Big Short before you listen to this episode, you might want to go ahead and do that. But the reason why I'm talking about the movie The Big Short is because I want to talk about money. Now, one thing about money that's interesting to me, very interesting. Look it up for yourself. Like I've mentioned before, that with the Bible, it at a certain point started getting really hard to find movies about Bible characters. Because I remember growing up, you used to find movies about Paul and about, Rachel and Abraham, or like whatever, Moses. Like there were all these movies. And nowadays, you don't really see those movies like Netflix or wherever. They usually have movies that aren't too based on the Bible directly, and they kind of take it and it has like some kind of, I mean, if you don't believe in the Bible, then it would be fictional anyways. But basically what I'm trying to say is there are movies about Bible characters that go by what the Bible says, and then, or at least kind of more what traditions kind of teach what it means and things. And then there are other movies that have this like completely fictional approach that's like, this isn't what you would read in the Bible about this person. It's some other story that's like made up with some other things kind of like thrown into it, which, I don't knock it. I don't see, on the surface too much concerning about that. And I might want to talk about that on a different day, but I don't really know for sure right now. But today I want to talk about money. The reason why I find money to be an important topic to talk about is because it is such a hush-hush thing. So I'm going to talk about the movie The Big Short. I'll kind of talk about generally what happens in the movie. I want to talk about concepts around money, usually kind of like traditionally what some different cultures kind of think about, or how just even in mainstream American culture, how we've usually been taught to view and think about money. Let's keep it controversial, guys. Let's keep our minds open to things and keep ourselves thinking. I don't have all the answers. I don't know what the heck I'm talking about sometimes. I talk from my own experience and from secondary or third level experience of like observing, content and trying to make sense of it. Or just what I've heard or seen from others around me, or just from what I deal with myself. So those are the angles I like to come at. But let's jump into it. So the movie The Big Short has a lot of big names. Steve Carell, Vin Diesel, Ryan Gosling, just to name a few. Ben Affleck. It's got a lot of people in it. So it's kind of a little bit of an older movie. But one thing the reason why I mentioned that about like the Bible characters is because a lot of times too, you don't have a lot of movies about finance and Wall Street. There aren't a lot of movies like that. Now, when you think about the American public, a lot of people learn from movies, right? Like, we all know, all right, there's something fake about it, but you can learn a lot from movies, especially when it's a movie about something that you know nothing about. You'll probably come out of that knowing more than you would have known before. about whatever that culture is that's being represented, or that time period, or whatever it may be. And so it's interesting that, someone like me who's really into finance, and I'm a complete nerd about that kind of stuff, and like, investing and things like that. I'm not saying that I'm like a pro or anything, but I like to learn about those types of concepts because they're important to me. And, it's kind of interesting that there aren't that many movies. Like, since the 80s, I think usually you can get like a list of about 10 movies, maybe a few more than that aren't documentaries about like Wall Street. There's some documentaries about crypto, there's a few about, there's some like movies about the crashes, there's a lot more documentaries, I would say. Like, if you want to look at things about the Great Depression and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot more documentaries than there are like representative like movies. But there are some, like there's that movie, I remember it's called King of the Hill. I remember it because I still do like that cartoon King of the Hill with Hank Hill and those Texan guys. But this movie, King of the Hill, was about a kid who lived during the Great Depression era. And it's a movie that, I don't know many movies like it. But going back to The Big Short, this movie, I'm not going to go into too much depth about it, but it is a spoiler alert. The movie's basically about Michael Burry, who's this doctor, not like medical doctor, I don't think, but well, I don't know, he has an MD, so I guess he is technically a medical doctor. But really good with numbers, and foresaw that there was something coming up before 2008. There was something coming up in the early 2000s that led him to believe that, the economy was going to be in a great disaster at that time. And so he starts researching it out and takes his fund and starts buying, a certain type of like spending like hundreds of millions of dollars buying on what most people would consider a bad purchase back then. Like, why would you buy this? So he would go and talk to these people, these firms, and that's what he would buy. And the guy who plays, Steve Carell's character is part of a different firm of people who I believe they work on Wall Street, and there's they're looking for like kind of the next good thing, but they kind of catch wind of something going on. And there's this other friend group who's smaller, like starting out smaller, and trying to get banks to be interested in them. And then they start making these purchases as well, because they find, at least in the movie, they find a prospect of someone else in one of the, I think it was in JP Morgan Chase. I don't know if it was called JP Morgan Chase back then, but in the lobby they find a prospectus that they read, and they kind of catch wind of like, oh shoot, like what's going on with the housing market, or so basically there are those groups, there's like those three groups, and then the fourth group would be the people who are actually selling these packages to the public. And then there's the people who are losing their houses, because they're getting screwed, when all this stuff kind of starts falling apart. And so you start seeing different levels of different people kind of knowing what's going on. And basically by the end, we all know what happened is, a bunch of people in real life, got laid off, a bunch of companies went under, a bunch of funds went under, the stock market had a crash, a lot of people lost their homes. And the reason why this is important is because, it was basically the American people, that paid for the banks to get bailed out. And the banks basically developed this fraudulent plan to lend money to people who didn't qualify to be able to buy houses. And not only that, there was also this other scammy stuff going on at the same time of people renting out these houses to people, people leasing these houses out to people, subleasing, subletting, and a lot of people losing their houses over that. They got in trouble. And so, the part I wanted to talk about is the fraud. That is the part that is concerning to me, because at the end of the movie, there's some text that kind of shows, in 2015, the banks started doing this again, right? We're in 2023 now, and we all know that the housing market is screwed. It's been screwed for a bit now, for a couple years now. So there's been stuff going on at least since before the Rona, since 2019. I think it all started becoming more and more revealed during 2020, 2021, 2022, now 2023. So the part that was of interest to me was the fraud, and government fraud in general seems to not be taken seriously. They can bend the rules, break the rules. I mean, look at Trump. The guy's he's been doing illegal things. He's been charged with it. And people are still saying he's going to run for president. It's like, is that okay? I mean, you've now got a record, buddy. You have a history of doing illegal things, yet you can still be in charge of running a country. I don't understand how that is possible. But that's how it is, I'm not even saying don't vote for Trump, whatever the fuck, I don't really care. But what I'm trying to say is these people get away with whatever they want to get away with when it comes to something else. Let's think about what happened. So basically the banks were able to bend their rules to do things that they weren't supposed to do, knowing fully well what the potential would come out to be, knowing fully well that the government had their back and that they wouldn't have to suffer through it. So there seems to be a link between the banks and the government allowing banks to do what they want to do, because who pays for it? Tax season comes along, we pay for it, right? The American people pay for what happens. And so, is this fair? I mean, we all know it's not fair. People don't listen, though. Even if there is a movie like The Big Short that, Netflix made it available to watch. I feel like it was available way before, then they took it off, and now they've put it back. And I think they've put it back because it's on niche with kind of what's going on trend-wise with the housing market and everything. So it kind of makes sense to put something out there that's kind of relevant. But what is it? What is it that we're doing? What is it that we're experiencing, guys? What's the experience coming out right now? What's going on? What's happening? What do you see? Is there anything you see, anything you notice, that is kind of out of whack, Like, I've seen some, you know, political representation that looks like they're struggling. I don't know how someone can be in office that's like actively having strokes or something, like on camera. There's things like that where you're like, what is going on? Like, how are these people in charge and they're doing all this stuff and nobody seems to really care? Like, it's just allowed. Like, let's let them be in office. It's like, I don't think if it was a typical job you would be able to have that job. Most people would be like, you gotta go, man. Like, if there was like a newscaster who couldn't remember the questions, couldn't respond to questions, they'd be like, look, you're not doing your job, buddy. You gotta go. You can't be on camera and representing the station talking about like important topics and needing to kind of like be well spoken, and you can barely think. Sometimes it's like any other place you'd get fired or let go, or at least forced to go on medical leave or need to go figure it out. But yeah, we have politicians that are allowed to keep their positions, some of the most important positions in our country, of decision making, of how we're expected to live our lives. And they're sick, they're ill, they have illnesses that keep them from performing their work. That's not a problem. I don't care if they're Democrats or Republicans or who the heck they are. It's like, if you are not well, you should not be part of running a country. If you I don't know. That's just maybe that's just how I think. Maybe I'm being ableist or something. Like, I'm not saying people need to be perfect. I'm not perfect. None of us are perfect. But I mean, you should at least be able to like do your job. It doesn't look good. It does not look good, to have footage of people that can't even like speak or remember. It's like, if you can't remember, then what are you doing? What are you doing? But I do feel sad for them too, with their problems. I feel sad for people having health issues. I don't think it's like a laughing matter, but it's also very concerning. It's pretty creepy that that's the best person to do that job. I mean, almost anybody else should be in that position at that point. Like, whoever has an interest in, U.S. government, who graduated high school, probably has a sharper mind than that person, that could probably do that job or start trying to be trained to do that job. Like, but anyways, so yeah, The Big Short, that's in general kind of what that movie was about, was these different groups of people that are involved in these different types of categories of very large, expensive types of investments in things that had to do with the housing market from different angles. The banks were backing, a lot of these. And so some people were invested in the banks. Some people were invested in, what's called tranches, like different ratings of tranches, betting against them. It is complex, but it's like, a lot of us didn't know any of this was going on. I was in grad school at the time when this was going on. I didn't know until it started being hard to get in touch with the financial aid office, until our financial reimbursement didn't get to us fast enough, and I couldn't buy books for like multiple weeks in the term or pay my rent because the reimbursement came out of that money from the school. And I ended up having to move back to the other area of LA because I didn't want to keep being late with the rent, because I wasn't working then. I wasn't able to work. I was busy in grad school. So Um, but yeah, so that was mostly what I saw from that movie, that I was like, why the heck is this movie, like, it kind of grabs my attention, but why are these, banks and governments able to commit fraud, you know, trick the people, and then the people get penalized? Either they lose their home, they lose their job, their company goes under, whatever it may be. And, they were saying in 2015, which is just not even 10 years ago, they started doing the same thing again, and it's called something different. It's a different name now. So, but they're doing the same thing that they were doing. And it's like, we're still not awake to this. Now, I haven't really seen with my own eyes an ease of access to housing. I've seen the opposite, and it might just be where I live, so I'm not very well informed on this. But what I have noticed is, it's hard to get your credit situated. It's hard to get your money situated. It's just harder, to get things kind of situated like they need to be. It's harder to get things situated because of inflation. So, this is maybe a little off topic, but a lot of people do say, Gen Z doesn't want to work. I don't think that's what it is. I think Gen Z can do math, and they see that, maybe I don't want to work at McDonald's and In-N-Out just to be able to have a roommate or a shared house with multiple people, because that's all I can afford. I don't think they want to do that. Who does want to do that? Who does want to work 2 jobs, 3 jobs to barely be getting by? I mean, if you're working 1 job and you're getting paid under $20 an hour, that's rough. That's real rough, guys. That's a rough day. Getting paid under $20 an hour in this economy. Like I've said it before, to live in Southern California, you need $40 an hour to be able to comfortably afford an apartment. An apartment for 1 person. You need $40 an hour. Most people would need probably more than that, if they have to consider all the debt and everything. But just to be able to afford and qualify, you're probably gonna have to bring home $40 an hour. So say for example, it's not uncommon out this way to have an apartment for about $2,000. And that means, you need to be making 2.5 the rent. 2.5 times the rent. They say preferably 3 times the rent if you're actually doing things to the T by what most financial professionals would say. Usually they do commonly say your rent shouldn't be 3 times what you're making. So $5,000 a month. $5,000 a month. How many people do you know that bring home $5,000 a month? Out of high school. Like, I don't know anybody out of high school who's bringing home $5,000 a month. I know people with master's degrees that aren't even bringing home 3,000 or barely near 3,000 a month. So if you need 5,000 a month, let's say somebody's able to find an apartment for $1,500. Let's say that's on the lower end. You need to be bringing home $3,750. Well, I don't know if that's even bringing home. Because that might be before deductions. You'd probably qualify before all your deductions. And so that means you're bringing home less than that amount of money. You're probably bringing home like less than $3,000 if you're making $3,750. And so, yeah, guys. I don't know what you think, but I think that's, it's BS. That's BS, To have to bring home to have to be making between $3,750 and $5,000 just to be able to get an apartment. That's a lot of money. So, if you're bringing home $3,750, you're making like $45,000 a year. If you're bringing home $5,000 a month, you're making nearly $60,000 a year. So that extra $15,000 amount difference, if you're bringing home anywhere between 45 or making, not necessarily bringing home, but making anywhere between 45 and 60K, you would be able to kind of qualify. And that's if your credit is really good. So that's kind of what it looks like out here. I know every state's different, every place is different, but that's what it looks like out here. I would say, it's not sustainable. Whatever it is that's going on right now does not appear to be a sustainable way to kind of treat the public. Usually the people who are buying these apartments or renting these apartments are people who are downsizing. They're not upgrading. Most people are downsizing. So people who used to have houses or used to have, a larger house, they're downsizing to these expensive 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom studio apartments. They're downgrading themselves, as in downgrading their cost of living. I'm not saying downgrading like, oh, they're lesser people now. I'm saying they're downgrading their costs of living. So, yeah, finances are important. We're going to keep talking about it. But that's kind of how it is. And, like, with looking at finances, it's not easy. And if there's a system in place that's keeping people ignorant and poor, I say ignorant because as much as we've opened this discussion that people aren't learning finance when they need to before they graduate from high school, they're not learning it in high school. They're not learning basics of finance. Most places don't teach that. Even something as simple as like Dave Ramsey's like Financial Peace University or something being taught in a school or offered, most people don't know. Most people's spending habits, they may have been forced to change with the economy as it is now, but the issue is, the mental and emotional that's behind all that spending hasn't really changed. A lot of people haven't evaluated or re-evaluated how and why they're spending their money the way that they do. And there's still this kind of like idea that, when I graduate high school, my life needs to look like this. By the time I'm done with college, if I go to college, my life needs to look like this. And after being in a job for a bit, I need to be in that position. And when I'm 40 years old, I need to be in this position. And I need to be able to retire. Like, there's all these markers in a person's life where, that looks different now. I don't know many people that moved out at 18 right now. Like, I don't know that many people that are like 18 right now either, but I don't know that many people who I've seen that look like they own apartments, have an apartment. It seems to be older people. The only people I think I've seen that seem younger that have their own place are people because I've been interacting with all these like leasing agent type people, these leasing professionals that work for these luxury apartments and have an apartment there. I've seen younger people doing those jobs, people who seem like they're maybe in their early 20s or so. But otherwise, a lot of people work at McDonald's, a lot of people work at In-N-Out. I mention it because there was always this classic idea like, oh, flipping burgers, you don't want to be flipping burgers or pumping gas. Dude, those guys flipping burgers are making as much as I was making working in the field of psychology with a master's degree, okay? So, they're making a little less, but they're making what I was making before the pandemic. And, like, they're probably making more than what I was making. Because if they're starting at, like, 18 an hour, close to 20 an hour with benefits, I mean, it's not work that's very sustainable, but it's, a lot of these companies are being forced to come up. It's like, if you want people to work for you, you got to be giving them something that's more than nothing. You got to give something more than nothing. People got to feel like it's worth it. And especially if you've got like a lot of stigma attached to the job, like, unfortunately, burger joints do have a lot of stigma attached to them. Gas stations do have a lot of stigma attached to them. But work is work, guys. Honest work is work. But we do have these fraudulent systems in place where, it's good to learn about, because these major corporations get away with murder. They're doing so much behind the scenes sometimes that, it's questionable. It's like, why is nobody getting in trouble? No one gets penalized. They're just allowed. It's like, this is what they're going to do. They're just allowed to do it. And they do it. And we're just like, okay. It was like, I guess that's just how it's going to be. But check out the movie. I mean, I didn't spoil enough of it, I don't think. It's kind of a harder concept to kind of talk about and grasp. I don't really know all the terminology enough to really speak intelligently to it. But that movie had a lot going on. And also think about, why are those movies so few and far between? There's The Wolf of Wall Street. There's 99 Homes. There's some movies about like housing market and all that kind of stuff. But you'd think with what we're dealing with these days, there'd be a whole lot of movies about, financial decline, a whole bunch of movies about pandemics, a whole bunch of movies about all kinds of stuff like that, which we're not really seeing. And I think there is some form of censorship. I know that, just from recording and being engaged with people who like to record about finance, create content around finance, you can't create financial advice. That's not legal. If you're not a professional who's eligible to be able to do that, I can't just like open up some kind of finance website and be like taking on customers and like telling them what to do with their money, because I'm not a professional at that. I can talk about it for entertainment purposes, about how to budget, how to invest, that kind of stuff, but I can't really talk about it like, hey, I'm really advising you on what to do. This is my professional opinion. I have no professional opinion. But yeah, it is kind of limited what people can talk about, and people don't learn about it. So to me, I'm like, there's something up. There's something up. It's more than what we see on the surface, guys. There is some kind of weird system in place, maybe even a conspiracy when it comes to finance, knowledge about finance, education. Um, you know, most of us don't get taught about buying a house. Most of us don't get taught about even basically budgeting our money. Now, culturally, certain people do get taught that. Certain cultures are more open to like discussing and like educating their families about that, but that's not everybody. Most people don't really know, or they see what their family did when they were growing up, and they're like, I either want to do it that way or I don't want to do it that way, but they don't really know how to like adjust their mind. Like, I've got family members that are way older than me that, as I've grown up, I've seen many of them, now being an older generation that might need to retire soon. And to my knowledge, their financial practices have not changed since I was in high school or even before. They're still blowing their money the same way they used to blow their money. They still don't have enough money. You know, I know people making six figures that don't have $2,000. To me, it's like, how the heck is that even a thing? How do you not have any money? Like, you make money. How do you not have any money? You know, people who, I'm not trying to like be judgmental, but I'm just saying, like, I've had conversations with people in my family who tried to tell me that they think that I'm too frugal. People who are in debt. And, that's one thing I like about how Dave Ramsey says, I think it was Dave Ramsey who was saying, don't listen to broke people, you know? It's almost like, okay, if I want to go to the gym and I'm like, I want to get fit, right? I want to get fit, and there's like a free program, right? Where they're like, you can chat online before you come here and see which trainer is going to be available, and they have a profile online and you can talk to them, and if I talk to 5 different trainers and 3 of them are like completely out of shape, you ask them about their lifestyle and they're like, oh yeah, I eat cake and cookies and pizza every day, and I don't really like take care of my mental health or anything. And I sit in front of the TV all day long and I'm depressed and I just cry all day, and then I come here and work. Like, would you want that person trying to train you in life that doesn't really know, like, they're not fit? It's like, if you're not fit and you're teaching people how to be fit, how does that work? How do you I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to be judgmental about people's weight. I'm just saying, usually you're going to pick a trainer that looks like they practice that lifestyle of physical fitness and what comes with it. You're not going to pick the person that seems like they're still trying to figure it out. You want to pick a person that has a good track record, who shows that they're able to do it too. So when somebody doesn't have any money, why on earth would you want to listen to somebody with no money to tell you what to do with your money? Why would one listen to that person? If somebody has a negative net worth, why would you want to listen to that person? If somebody doesn't have a portfolio about their work, why would you hire somebody to help you with a certain thing if they can't show you what they can do? I mean, yeah, maybe you can trust them and maybe they will be skilled, but it just doesn't make sense, right? Why would you? One thing that I've also come across is like, not just people who um not just people who want to like tell you what to do, but it's like sometimes you gotta just take a step back and look and just be like, sometimes people just want to tell you what to do, but why would you take that advice? One of my clients way back told me, and I at first I took it strangely, but one of my clients told me, she was an elderly lady, and she was like, I don't want a doctor that's fat. And she's like, you're not fat. I'm overweight now, but at the time she was saying this, it was probably like in 2017 or something. She was like, you're not fat. You're like, all the other people that she worked with in that facility weren't fat. And she's like, this is health. Like, why would I want to have a doctor that doesn't know about health for themselves, And I was kind of like, because that doctor I thought was like, intelligent, and he was nice and stuff, so I didn't really think much of it, because I was like, it felt to me like it was a good fit because he was nicer than some of the other doctors. But she didn't like him because of how he was. She didn't like him because of how he looked, because he was severely overweight, and to her she was like, that doesn't, I don't want to talk about my health to somebody who doesn't care about theirs. Now, maybe, there was maybe some kind of hormonal issue or something. Like, there are people who have some other reason why they've gained a lot of weight, but I would say most times that's probably not the issue. A lot of times it's practices and habits. But I've taken things, I've had like certain types of like medicines that lead to weight gain and stuff like that, but sometimes it's like, well, why am I taking the medicine in the first place? Because there's some other issue going on. And a lot of times, for me anyways, it's usually boiled down to my own daily practices. And so a lot of it is, there's a lot of ability to be able to like repair stuff. But yeah, when it comes to finances, even with the government, it's like, how many trillions of dollars in debt is our government? So I would even question, like, even if they did roll out some kind of like program about economics or something, that they actually were trying to actively teach people through the public school system, it's like, what would they be teaching? Because they don't seem to know how to handle money. It's pretty nuts. It's pretty nuts. Like, when you think of it, it's like, this is crazy stuff. It's just crazy to me. It fascinates me too at the same time, but it's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, check out the movie. You might like it. And with that, thanks for listening.